So welcome to Cinergy Prague and to this online artist talk with one of our time's great composers, Dustin O'Halloran. Hi, Dustin.
Hello. Hi.
You're with us? Yeah, great. I want to say welcome first and foremost to our audiences who are with us from around the world, I hear. And on behalf of Cinergy Prague and myself, my name is Louise Johannsson. I'm based here in Prague, Czech Republic. And and welcome to Dustin, who is with us from his studio in Reykjavik. Am I right?
Yep.
Yeah. Say that again?
It's nice and dark. Entering the winter.
I'm just going to say a few introductory words to our audiences about what they can expect, because you can actually send over questions for Dustin as we go, and we encourage you to do that. We're going to be on for about 90 minutes, and in your YouTube window, you basically have to log into YouTube in order to send a question, and you can find a chat window there, and we will be trying to incorporate your questions into the conversation as we go. So don't save them till the end. Just fire away. And through this artist talk, we're gonna be going deeper into the work of Dustin, and he will show us some clips from his film oeuvre, and we're gonna be listening to some music as well. So we're dealing now with a composer whose first job on a film was when Sofia Coppola got in touch and asked him to write some music. And this was Marie Antoinette back in 2006. And next thing, about 10 years later, you're an Oscar-nominated and Emmy-winning composer, Dustin. And the latest film you scored, it's called Antoinette, and it was in the official selection in Cannes this summer. We're going to be talking about many of these highlights, of course, but also what happened in between. We're going to go a bit deeper. And we're going to be talking about your scores for film and TV series, your collaborations with Volker Bertelmann, also known as Hauschka, and with your band, a Winged Victory for the Sullen. We're going to be hearing a bit about your new film score at the end of the conversation for Antoinette. We're going to be listening to that and talking about it, and as well as your upcoming record, which I hope you will spill a few beans on what is in store for us there. And we're going to be talking about the actual process of writing film music. We've chosen to focus specifically on collaboration, the art of collaboration, because it's such a important aspect of writing film music specifically, and the transitions you've gone through in your career from solo artist and solo performing artist to working with the various collaborators and writing for orchestra and so on. So Dustin, I want to get you talking now. I want to start off by asking you about something you said recently in connection with your collaboration with Sofia Coppola. You said that art attracts art. Can you elaborate on this?
Well, I think a lot of people have asked how I started getting into film scoring, and I guess I came at it from maybe a different angle. It was something that I was always interested in, and I'm a big lover of film, but it wasn't something that I was necessarily pursuing directly. And when I was living in Italy, I was working on my first solo piano record, which was a pretty lo-fi situation. I was recording at home on an upright piano and writing these pieces, and I didn't even really have much plans to release it. And when I released it, that's when Brian Reitzel, Sofia's music supervisor, got in touch with me and started talking to me about the film they were making. And so it was a very serendipitous, sort of natural connection that happened. And I think that I think I was just creating music for myself, but that attracted it for some reason. It was just right for this project. And so they asked me to write some music for the film. There's a lot of music in the film. I mean, it's got The Cure and Susie and the Banshees and a lot of other artists. And so I just started writing, and I didn't write at that time. She was just editing to music. So we started the music very early, and I wasn't writing to picture. I just had a book of images and sort of inspirations and just a few chats about the story and her take on it. So it was it was a bit different than what I later learned was actual film scoring. So it was mainly just me sort of doing what I do and making music mostly for myself. And then she ended up choosing 3 pieces that she used for the film. But it was a very, very much just me being myself and writing music for myself. And then it worked out.
Writing more to the sort of the mood of the film and the story of the film than a specific scene.
Yeah, I had no idea. They were filming at the time, so I hadn't seen anything. Mm-hmm. I actually didn't see until till the premiere. I hadn't where they used the music, so that was not a typical way to score a film, but it was also a nice entry. Just being able to think about it and use my imagination and also put a lot of myself into it.
Mm-hmm. I think you basically ended up opening the film. One of your songs, and I think we should see the clip now. So if we can watch the first clip, it's called, it's the one with Opus 17, clip A.
The court of France is not like Vienna. Listen closely to Ambassador Mercy's counsel. All eyes will be on you.
Definitely very French.
Okay, so here we're dealing with your piano solos, obviously your very early work, and I guess this is what Coppola and many of us fell for, this singular strong voice. Did you think about introducing any other instruments at this early stage, or was it clear that you wanted to work with piano only?
Well, this piece was one that I had actually written for my first record, and it was the piece that she had a lot of mixtapes and a lot of mixes that she was listening to while she was writing, and so this was the piece that sort of brought me into the project.
Mm-hmm.
And then I ended up writing 2 original pieces, but this was just me writing alone in Italy.
Yeah, so with no memo or no dialogue with your director, basically.
No. And so it was pretty clear that she wanted just this solo piano, and also the sound that, for whatever reason, the sound of this piano in Italy was just very particular and had, I guess, an old sound to it. I did end up going to Paris and doing a bit of recording. I re-recorded a lot of the pieces on an old Pleo piano from the late 1700s, and it was a pianoforte, which is a bit different than the modern piano. It's tuned a bit lower, mm-hmm. and the sustain is a little bit different, and we ended up some recording with that as an experiment, and then I think on the release when they did the soundtrack, the 23 is actually from the pianoforte, which has a really beautiful sound. It sounds very woody, and it doesn't sound like a modern piano. So it was actually really nice to be able to play an instrument like that, this rival instrument.
And it's also a piece which is sort of it has a feeling of fitting a period film. It's a bit Baroque-esque.
Yeah,
what would you call it?
Getting my ode to Bach.
Oh yes, but I think we should see the second clip that we have prepared from Marie Antoinette. It's with the Opus 23. We talk about it after.
Dearest Antoinette, I'm pleased to tell you how wonderful your brothers and sisters are doing in their marriages. Maria Carolina is pregnant, expecting her first child in June, and Ferdinand is enchanted with Beatrice, having made her his wife at once. All this news, which should fill me with contentment, is diminished by reflections on your dangerous situation. Everything depends on the wife, if she is willing and sweet. I can't repeat enough the importance for you to employ charm and patience, never ill humor, to remedy this unfortunate situation. Remember, nothing is certain about your place there until an heir is produced.
So this piece feels like it was written to the scene, or the scene is maybe written to the music, is what I'm going to ask you, Dustin.
Well, Sofia had asked me to sort of try to capture her innocence, and she was such a young girl at the time, and so this piece was really me sort of trying to find this this voice of her innocence and naivety, and and I think that there's also a bit of decadence in there as well. I mean, they obviously living a very decadent life, and so I wrote this with no picture, and I didn't know where it would end up. So this was me being surprised when I first saw it. But yeah, this one is one of those pieces that sort of came very quickly and immediately found its way into the film, and just one of those moments when you sort of just capture it and it came quite easily. But it's a simple piece of music that has seemed to remain for a while.
It's incredible how synergetic it feels, and you're telling us that you didn't write it to picture. Because it really lifts the emotional level and the story, and there's so many things going on in the scene that you sort of like manage to, the transitions throughout the scene, you also manage to embrace with the music. So I have a feeling that she if not, she didn't write the scene to the music, maybe she cut it to it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that those are sort of the best moments in films. Stanley Kubrick did that a lot. He used so much existing music and he cut it to the music, and editors do that already. They use temp music, and so I think that it's a very great way to make it feel together. I always feel it's hard to write music to a scene that's been temped, and the editor is edited basically to a temp score, which then you have to go in and fit around. So I think my favorite moments in film are usually cut to existing music. Even though I scored a lot of films, I always feel like that works the best. If you can write a piece of music that then they can cut to, then you get this magic. There's a magic that happens with film and editing and music that everyone's reaching for, but in its best moments, it's something that the music turns the picture in a way that nobody is expecting. And I think when you're writing to picture, you're always writing exactly to what you're seeing. So it's a little bit harder to get these accidents that I think can be really beautiful. Mm-hmm.
That's something you aim for in general, to sort of not to tell the same as the picture tells you, but to add a sort of not necessarily a surprise, but another element.
Well, whenever I have a chance to write not to picture, I try to do that. I always think that's a really good way just to get away from being pushed too much by the picture, and to just remember you're writing music. Mm-hmm. And that I always find that's when the work works the best also in the film, because giving the editors and the directors the chance to put it where it needs to be. I'm not a huge fan of writing to picture, actually, because I think that it's hard. It's hard to do it and stay true to making music, because you can't help but be guided by the edits. Mm-hmm. And it's not always helpful, unless it's something that's action or there's something really specific about how it has to shift. But usually if you write music, and then you can kind of get into where it needs to shift and change. But I think the heart of a good piece of music is usually written without picture.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting because many film composers, they are sort of on their knees asking to read scripts and be on board as early as possible, which is super hard, and especially in the world of Hollywood. But it's a bit easier in the world of film, of indie films. So, but maybe this is also because your background is in solo writing, and
yeah, I think most of the work that I've done in film has usually come from the records that I've made, and it's once in a while it's from another film score, but it's usually just me making my own records and making my own music, and how that finds its way into a film, and that's what connects me with the director. And I think it's a very natural way to do it as well, because I think that as you, it's hard to, as you get deeper into scoring for film, you really, you always have to take a step back to get back to yourself. I think they're, in some ways, they're connected, but they're very two different ways of writing.
Mm-hmm. It connects a bit with a question we have from someone in the audience, Paula. She asks, just wondering, from a point of view of releasing music just for oneself, how did Sofia Coppola's music supervisor find your music? How was the connection made?
Well, I had a band for a long time, Divix, and with the singer Sarah Love, and we were releasing records on a British label, Bella Union. And Simon, who started the label, he was the first person to want to release the Piano Solos record. So actually, it was sort of a side project from the band that I was doing, and he released it. And I think he had a band called the Cocteau Twins, and so I think that's sort of how it ended up getting into his hands, because they were using a lot of this 80s new romantic music, and somehow that showed up in a mixtape that Sofia had. So I don't, they probably didn't even realize that I was alive, or I don't know, it just ended up there, and so yeah.
Bach's apprentice. That's the last time I'm going to call you that.
Yeah.
We have another question which is related from Gintara. If you know if any directors you worked with played a piece of your music in their headphones while they were shooting a scene.
That's a good question. I actually don't know that. Maybe, I'm not sure.
I mean, like, we can maybe talk about it later when it comes to some of the other films. But if you ever like ping pong sent files sort of early in the process, and so they had the opportunity to actually listen to it, maybe even with the actors, to sort of get in the mood of that specific scene.
It really depends where you enter into a film. Sometimes I've started with a script, and sometimes I start and they have a final cut. So it all depends on where, at what you get involved. But actually, I'm not sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And just to talk a bit more about maybe just a bit of a jump back in time, could you tell us about your musical background and when you started playing the piano?
Well, I started pretty early, but I didn't do conservatory or anything. I just had a few simple lessons from my mom's church organist. And it was just basic, a few years. So I didn't really have I sort of came back to the piano much later, but I started a band when I was around 17, 18, with singer Sarah Love, and we made 4 or 5 records together and toured all over Europe. And so the band was really my first entry into songwriting and arranging and learning about production. And very early on, I got a 4-track and was recording everything and doing a lot of my own recording and kind of getting into that. So I always sort of had a big part of what I do is also using the studio as an instrument and learning to record, and I've gotten very into it, and I love the process of recording and understanding how you record also can change how a listener feels the music. Mm-hmm. And so once that was apparent to me, and I think that's much stronger in the electronic rock world, tone and sound is such a big part of record making. And so I think that's always been helpful to have learned that and to get into it. And my longtime collaborator, Francesco Donadello, who I've been working with for about 15 years, is my engineer and mixer. We've go very deep into the recording process and how we capture things, and so that's kind of where things began.
Yeah, it's still interesting to if you consider your first two albums, your piano solos. One wouldn't think that the sort of the main inspiration and that you were and the scene you were in was rhythmical and not classical. No?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I had an early love of classical music when I started playing, but I don't think I was never good enough to play the pieces that I wanted to play. And I think I've been thinking a lot about why I started to sort of write my own pieces, and I think it was a bit because of that, because I didn't have you really have to have a kind of conservatory background to get the muscles in your hands, and it's almost like a ballet dancer has to start so early, and I always suffered because of that, and so I think I just was writing my own music that I could play.
But on a positive side, I think that's what might give it that lightness and that light tone and simplicity. I think that can lead us on to your third album and a conversation about a process also and still your relationship with your piano. But so you did piano solos 1 and 2 in 2004 and 2006, and then a jump up to around 2010-11, and where you released an album called Lumiere, and new things started to happen sound-wise. Yeah. And I think we should listen to a clip now after all this introductory talk. You picked the song "We Move Lightly." Mm-hmm. Do you want to say a few words before, or should we just listen?
This was actually one of the last pieces that I had recorded. I recorded the piano in Italy, and during that time, I started working on the record and then made a move to Berlin. And when I was in Berlin, I ended up meeting a lot of people and doing a lot of different recordings, and Berlin was sort of a chance for me to connect with a lot of different musicians. And the violin here is actually Peter Broderick, who's a talented musician.
Someone who played with the Efterklang, among others, but also has done beautiful solo work.
Yeah. And then when I finished the record, Jóhann Jóhannsson mixed it and helped me finish it.
Great. Let's listen to "We Move Lightly." It's audio clip number 1. This was We Move Lightly from the album Lumiere, which you also featured in the film Like Crazy, directed by Drake Doremus.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to say, you know, when I heard this song, it just, there's something that it triggered, and it's about your unique voice and your ability to write really with emotional weight and gravity, which I think is rare on the scene that is called the new classical scene, or the music that is coming out today. It's not everyone who can do that, and at the same time, with the space and the quietness, it's extremely inviting, and it's inviting for a film environment, obviously, also. So do you want to tell us a bit about how a bit about the song, and also how you sort of fit it to the American indie film Like Crazy?
Well, that was a piece that he ended up using, but the piece itself, I think I've always, you can kind of see my fascination with counterpoint. The first track you played, Opus 17, and I absolutely love Bach, and I love Scarlatti, and just this very delicate counterpoint where two melodies intertwine with each other. And I think, but I also listen to so much new music and electronic music. There's so many things that are always sort of coming to me, and I think this was just a sort of an idea of like creating a counterpoint piece that could feel modern, and then I really love what Peter's violin playing. He has this really particular touch that's very, very soft. He can play violin maybe quieter than I've ever heard anybody play. And it's great because we recorded this in my studio in Berlin. It was, at the time, it was just in my house, and just with a very close mic, and just getting this really, he could just get so much tone out of a really softly played violin. And yeah, so this is just one of those pieces that just sort of evolved over time. Mm-hmm. And I think in most of my work, I try to take out any notes that aren't needed. I'm attracted to music that feels very concrete in that way, and I love simplicity. I've always been attracted to pieces that were more simple, and I mean, I always love the adagios. So I tend to like slower music, and I like the simplicity when you can really savor a melody or a harmony, and so I think that's something that always follows me.
And is that something? Does it come out that way, or do you sometimes write more and thicker, layered, and then you cut down?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it's a process of building up, and sometimes I build something up and realize that I just need to strip it back and tear it away. And in a way, that's a little bit how Wing Victory for the Sullen works. We'll write a lot of material, and sometimes it will only take certain parts, and then that will end up being the song. And I think I try to figure out what's necessary. Mm-hmm. I don't like to ornament a song that's unnecessary. And I think that's sort of what I'm always trying to figure out, is what's necessary, what's lifting the song, or what's lifting the piece of music, and what's just decoration. So I try to avoid decorating music too much, and I like it to be very pure in that way.
How do you actually handle? You've written for a few period pieces, period films. We also have a question about how you prepared from Daniel Mackil. How you prepared for Marie Antoinette. Did you go through some sort of research on the period and the Queen herself, or was your work based only on your idea of the period?
Well, I actually read a book at the time about her life. I was curious, and I liked it. I mean, research is if you have time to research, it's actually one of the interesting parts about working on a project is you get to learn something new, and you get to learn something about a period or a person or something. And so yeah, I definitely did the research, but at the same time, I didn't have picture, and there's just a lot of myself as well. So.
And do you sometimes sort of? I guess there's a sort of a trap for composers to fall into too incidental music. You're writing for, is that what it's called? If you write for a certain environment or a time,
Yeah.
Do you try to avoid that, or do you play a little bit with it?
Well, I've recently been reading Ennio Morricone's biography that he wrote. It's called In His Own Words, and he was talking about when he was starting to make film music, how a lot of composers before were talking about film music as furniture music. And and I can understand if you're writing music that has dialogue, it ends up becoming a bit furniture for the scene. But I think the best directors know how to use music, and I think the best directors give space for music, and it's a process that they think about when they're making the film. And I think that's when you get to make a great piece of music, or there's space for it. And I think that's always the best way. I think music should not be used as underscore. That's my favorite. And I think that then it gives space to actually do something.
That's something that I think we'll be talking about a little later. What you sort of what kind of voice you wish to be with your music in the films, and I'm sure it depends on what film it is. But we have a few examples later. There is a question from Daniel Tröckler. One moment, I just lost it. It's about your process when writing for film. What is more convenient for you when you start your work? Is it better to start composing in pre-production or after lock cut? And what is harder?
Well, it's harder to start earlier because it's a much longer process and it's more time. So you can score a film in a month, 2 months, but if you start early, it can last 6 months. And there's much more, but I think the music always comes out better when you start earlier. So you sacrifice time for a better score. And I think that's always the give and take. But it just depends on when you get involved. So it's not always, you don't always have the luxury to start early. And it's very nice because I think when there's no temp score, there's no idea yet of how the music needs to be, and the editors haven't edited to the music, there's a lot more freedom to be creative. And I think that the most creative work comes like that.
Mm-hmm. So I think we should listen to another track. You send over Departures from the movie Like Crazy. Let's listen to that. It's number 2 on the list. So Dustin, this was the song called Departures from the film Like Crazy, a piano piece, obviously. And I want to ask you what the piano is to you. And, you know, after all these years, does it still keep offering you something new?
Yeah, it's interesting because I started this road making piano music without really realizing that I would be called a pianist. And it wasn't really my intention, because I've always loved the instrument. I felt very attracted to it. I think mainly because it's something that you can do alone. You don't need a computer. And it was something that it was the only instrument that I knew how to play besides guitar. But it's an instrument that encompasses everything. It's rhythmic. There's bass, there's high, you can kind of capture so much. It's such a diverse instrument. And I think that it's just a beautiful instrument to write on. But as I was making Lumiere, I obviously wanted to explore writing for strings and write for other instruments and sort of take a step back from the piano a bit. And it's something that I'm always exploring. And I think my piano playing has always been a bit limited. So I feel there's things that I want to do. And so I felt like it's always been interesting to explore with players that are much better and see to write for them and explore that. So I think I think limitations have always been strangely an asset for me. Mm-hmm. And I think limitations are always interesting for any type of creative work. And so I'm always trying to become a better piano player, but I go through periods where I also love working with electronics, and there's a lot of things that sound work, and there's a lot of other things that I'm interested in. So, but the piano is something that I continue to love, and it's just personal. I just like to sit down and I like to step away from the computer and everything.
So if we could have a look into your studio, which we actually are having right now, but sort of on a normal day, on a normal work day, how do you actually write? Do you sit by the piano, or do you write pen and paper, or does it take a mood? You know,
sometimes nothing happens, and it's experimenting with sound. Sometimes I'm messing around with some synths, or it's not always at the piano. And I'll use the computer a lot for writing string arrangements. And it's obviously, if I was born in any other period, I might not have been able to do what I do. But I think technology is an asset, and I think that creativity is something that you don't necessarily need schooling for. So at the end of the day, I've done a lot of my own research, and I've doing a lot of my own reading and reading books about orchestration, and just trying to learn as much as I can on my own, and using the computer to help me figure out how to arrange for strings. And over time, I've learned so much about when you go in and you actually start recording what works, what I like. And it's helped me be more confident in understanding how to work with an orchestra, and working with very talented arrangers who will help maybe with balancing voices, and then learning. I'm always learning, and I've just sort of learned in the process of every step that I make. I'm always learning something. So I like that everything, it feels new to me in a way, because I'm always learning, and there's so much to learn. So I like feeling like that, because I enjoy that process.
Mm-hmm. And do you like do you work like I know Nick Cave has talked about, he works 9 to 5 and then he goes home. Can you work like that, or do you work when the inspiration is there?
I mean, Berlin is a city that runs on its own clock. And so Berlin, the time I spent in Berlin, there were some late nights. And in Berlin, you're lucky if you can get a cup of coffee before 10 a.m. So I tended to work pretty late sometimes. But as projects and things became much busier, I realized that just working sort of 9 to 5 is sort of the best way to stay creatively active, because if you come in every day, you need the energy and you need good sleep and you need to take care of yourself and you need to actually have a life outside of the studio. I think that if I stay in the studio too long, it becomes a feedback loop. And it's one of the reasons why I love to collaborate with other people, because I love getting out of my own head and getting inspiration from somebody else's creativity.
Mm-hmm. I think we should jump into your film scoring a bit deeper and move on to your. We've listened to some music from Like Crazy, which is from 2011, and you did 2 more collaborations with the director Drake Doremus.
Yeah.
It's in 2013 came the film Breathe In. We have a track from that one we will listen to in a sec. And in 2015, a film called Equals, a sci-fi, as far as I remember. So this is sort of a longer-lasting collaboration with Drake. What makes this collaboration special?
Well, Like Crazy was the first film that we did together, and I think that the story really resonated with me, and it was personal on a lot of levels for him and me, and then the film ended up winning the Grand Jury Prize at Sundance, so that was a big step for everybody in the film, even Felicity Jones. That was one of her first films, and so good directors tend to stay with their composers for a while. But I always liked how much space he gave the music, and I always found that I was able to write a lot of really music that I felt really good about because there was a lot of space for that. Mm-hmm. And so that's, we went on a long journey of a few films. The last film actually was a collaboration with Sasha from Apparat, and that was the first time I had sort of worked just on an electronic score. Mm-hmm. And I think everybody wants to do a sci-fi movie at some point. And that was fun. It was really, I have a big love of analog electronics, and so it was a chance for me to just explore that and see what I could do. Okay,
we're gonna just jump back to the film Breathe In, and is it the closing track, Coda? Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's listen to Breathe In, Coda. So this was coda from the film Breathe In from 2013. I just, when listening to these scores of yours at this time, it strikes me that there is a lot of freedom to score in the indie world. Is that correct, or is this just very special for your relationship with Drake, the director?
Well, I think he gave me a lot of freedom, and usually the music is playing. There's nothing else happening. There's no dialogue, so it's a big part of just having that space. Mm-hmm. And also, we'd worked together for a long time at that point, so there's some trust that you build.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What happened next? I mean, did you go on to? This is sort of like overlapping, then, I guess, with your job on. You got the job on the TV series Transparent, which was actually an Amazon production, as far as I remember. And I remember meeting you at the time, and you were like so deep into this project, you barely had time to sort of peep out of your head out of the studio, just like, yeah, there's so much work. Like there's just so much, And what was this was made by Jill Soloway, and can you tell us how this collaboration came about?
Well, Jill was a friend of mine for a long time, and she was visiting Berlin, and she was using some of my music in the first episode. She was just temping it in, and we had breakfast together. She was telling me about the story, and she ended up giving me the first episode, and it was great. I really loved it. I loved the pathos and this family, how real the family was, and I thought it was a really interesting story. And she's a very unique director. She really is, she's very fearless in a lot of ways. And so it was really fun to work on that. It was the first time I'd ever done a series, and luckily they were short episodes, but it was still the first time me sort of getting a hold of having to write that much music and how fast it goes. It works much faster than film. And it was just a different pace, but I think we did.
I think.
Hello.
If technical feedback.
All right.
Do we still have Dustin with us? So Dustin, if you hear this, we just had a bit of fallout in the sound. How is it now, Marian? Yeah. So I missed a bit of what you were saying about sort of the vibe with Jill, and was that like a close dialogue on what to sort of like go for emotionally and yeah.
She was listening a lot to second piano solos while she was writing that, and so that was sort of there was a natural entryway, but the show ended up evolving musically into a lot of different directions, but where it started was there, so it was sort of a starting point of me just kind of coming in, doing what I do, and but she was really gave me a lot of trust, and it was a great collaboration.
Let's listen to it. It's the theme from the TV series Transparent. So I always love this theme and the opening of that series. And And I think we should go on to talk more in depth about your collaborations. So after Transparent, you've scored. I mean, you keep on scoring throughout this process, and you keep on making sort of releases with your bands, and I think we should talk about sort of the art that is film making and film scoring, which is sort of so intertwined with the sort of a collaborative spirit.
Yeah.
And in 2016, you got the job on the film Lion, which, to jump to the end of this, ended up getting nominated for Oscars, Golden Globe, BAFTA, Critics' Choice Award, and so on. And I think you should tell a little bit about how did you get picked for this job?
Well, Garth Davis, the director, it was interesting because he contacted, Hauschka was playing a concert in Australia and ended up meeting him. And Garth approached him and asked him about working on the film. And he said, would you be up for collaborating? And he mentioned me, but he didn't realize that Volker and I had been friends for about 10 years at that point.
All right.
I met her when I was living in Italy. He was doing a show in Ferrara. And it was actually at the time I was writing for Marie Antoinette. And I was experimenting with prepared piano because we were talking about exploring prepared piano. And so I was writing pieces without knowing who Hauschka was. I'd never heard his music. And I was invited to his show. I was about an hour away from where I was living at the time. And I remember his show was amazing, but I realized I just had put my hands on my face because I just realized there's no way I could touch the prepared piano because he was so deep into it and doing it so well.
Do you want to put a few quick words on what is prepared piano?
Well, prepared piano is putting objects inside the piano, changing the tone and the timbre, metal, wood. It's just taking the piano and deconstructing into a new instrument. And John Cage was maybe the person that made it famous by experimenting with it. But Hauschka had a really unique way of making it his own. And so we ended up becoming really good friends. And at the time when I finished Lumiere, we ended up being on the same label. We were on the 130701 label through Fat Cat, which was a British label out of Brighton. And so we actually toured a lot together and played a lot of shows, and we had a long friendship. So when Garth asked us to do Lion, we had already spent so much time together. It was actually, he didn't realize that we were friends, so it was very nice. It was the first time we actually collaborated on anything before. We talked about it in passing, but it was nice to have something concrete to actually do together. And I was spending time in Los Angeles, and he came to LA, and we actually ended up writing most of that in Los Angeles together. It's
super interesting. You're two pianists co-composing.
Yeah.
And I mean, you've explained a bit about the differences now, but how do you feel you complement each other? Because you ended up doing a lot of scoring together up until this day.
Yeah. My collaboration with him is, we didn't really know if that was just going to be a one-off or if we would do more. And I think because we were such good friends and we just there was never any ego about how to write music. And I think even though we're very different in what the music that we make, the heart of how we approach music is very similar. And also our backgrounds just kind of coming into composing from a different angle. You know, he had been in bands and I had been in bands, and we were just kind of coming at it from a different angle. And it
not one way of doing it, obviously.
Yeah, and I think that it was
one school.
Yeah, and I enjoy not having to sharing a work like that, a film is already so collaborative. I still to this day, I think the more I make films, the more I realize that a great film, when it comes out great, it's kind of a miracle because there's so many things involved and there's so many elements that could shift, and you never know if this actor is not available, maybe it changes, and there's so many elements of chance. And so sharing the music is just one more step in this big collaborative piece. And
we have a related question from Daniel Tröckler again, who's asking if you, after working on a score for a long time, I guess, do you doubt it? Is it difficult to tell if it's good or not? Or I guess you can wait and see the results on the big screen?
I mean, I think, you always wonder if you can do things better, and it depends on how much time you have. But at the end of the day, you get kind of so close to it, you almost can't see it in that way. And you just, you do your best. And I think I've always had to utilize whatever was around me at the time. So I think that when I finish things, I try not to listen to them too much. And maybe over time, then I can look back and think,
sure. Well, that's good. We're here to remind you then of your work. Let's take a closer look at Lion. We have this very special scene which comes with a story also. It's the 4-minute scene. The track is called Arrival. Do you want to say a bit about what we should look for in this scene before we see it?
Yeah. Well, Garth wanted to create a piece of music that could follow the whole journey of this film and evolve and come back. And he really wanted to create a connection to Saru's life. I mean, this incredible journey that he had through all of these points from India to Australia.
If I can just, it's a story about a boy who gets lost from his family in India when he's like 5 or something like that, and he gets adopted by an Australian family, and later in life, in his grown-up years, he decides to go back and find his family. Yeah. Right.
And it's based on a true story, which is pretty incredible. And so we had the opening of the film opens with the theme that ends up evolving through all of these different parts of the story. And this is near the end, and it's a pretty long scene where he's traveling. He's saying goodbye to his adopted family. He's going for the first time to India, and he's going to find his real mother. And this piece of music was particularly hard because it had to be scored to picture, and we had done a demo in my studio, but then it had to be re-recorded and done properly. And it was one of those moments where I learned a lot about film scoring, because I didn't really understand what we had gotten ourselves into, because it's a rubato piece of music, which means there's no tempo. So everything had to flow, and there's a lot of sections that need to sort of happen at certain points. Mm-hmm. So this piece of music was recorded live to picture, and it was really hard. I mean, I remember hoping that I was going to get it, because the push and the pull of the music affects the time later. And it was one of those pieces of music that was really challenging to record, because I had to have the picture playing while it was being recorded, and making sure that everything felt natural, but it was like hitting all of the right points. And it was very challenging. But
let's take a look. Yeah. So let's see the clip C, Lion, Arrival. It's 4 minutes long. Enjoy.
Found home. Please wait for me. I'll be here. So this is where you've been.
I didn't want you to feel I was ungrateful. There wasn't a day I didn't want to tell you.
So, I really hope she's there. She needs to see how beautiful you are.
So this is quite a scene. There's so much going on here, and there's so much plot actually going on, so much narrative that is cut down into 4 intense minutes of him traveling back to India. And you told us that I'm trying to imagine you sitting there, playing live piano to the screen. Is this something that happens often in Hollywood?
Probably not, because it's so difficult to do. But I think if there's a conductor and an orchestra, there's a lot of different ways. As I've learned, the history of film scoring is actually pretty interesting, because a lot of early scores were recorded before and they would edit to picture. A lot of the Morricone work, a lot of these 50s and 60s scores were the music was pre-recorded and then edited to the picture. And so as modern when came in, there would be an element where they would use streamers to understand the time, and there would be a big picture, and a streamer would go across, and as it got shorter, you would understand where something would happen. And some of the older composers still use that, and I think
is it like an old time like instead of having a click track, you had some visual marker, or how is it?
It's like a visual marker. And then I think that as recording came in, the click became a big part of music, which I find challenging, because I always felt that a lot of modern scores started to feel very metronomic and you could hear that there is a click in there. And I've always tried to experiment pulling away, but I never had the option of using a streamer or something like this. And a lot of times I'm just doing it by myself. So I'm not really doing big orchestra scores. But I've kind of experimented both ways. When I've used the orchestra, I'll use a sort of moving click to help just the conductor hears, so that he can follow where things need to be. And then I've also explored just having them, once they understand, just playing and having the conductor help kind of get it into the right place. I'm not conducting my own scores. I think ultimately that's where the real mastery happens. I think Morricone and John Williams, these very, very skilled conductors who, when you listen to their scores and how they move, it's incredible. And that's something that's the very, very masterful. And I've gained a lot of appreciation of how difficult that is, especially when I did that scene. So it's it's something that I'm always learning and trying to find how. I think the most musical way to make music is without any sort of tempo and just feeling it. And so unless it's a beat driven piece or something that is obviously has a metronomic part of the music. Mm-hmm. But so that's it's something that I'm exploring. I mean, maybe one day I'll conduct. I mean, I like being in the control room and hearing how things sound when the recording process is happening. But who knows? Maybe I will.
But it is one thing that makes you fairly unique to be the actual piano player yourself, and to be performing your scores and not have someone else do it for you.
I think that's what always gives it the personal touch. And I think that what I have discovered is the way that I phrase and the way that I play piano it's just sort of me. And if I give it to somebody else, it never feels like me, and so I just end up doing it. So it never feels right. And for better or for worse, I'm sort of stuck, always playing my own piano. But I like it. It's a challenge.
And regarding your competences, we have a fun question from Jóhann Albrechtsen, who is asking, or who's writing. You worked as a Foley artist on multiple projects. I'd love to hear about your thoughts on the interplay between sound design and music, and collaborating with the sound designers.
Yeah, I think probably the first time that became more, the first film that really sound design was such a big part of the film was Old Guard. And that's a bit of there's a lot more action. There's much more sound design. A lot of the films that I've done have been very low sound design, more dramatic. Mm-hmm. But that one definitely was the first time that we had to sort of work with the sound designer to understand the space that we had to work with, because you need to sort of treat the sound as an instrument as well. And if you have a lot of bass and then you have explosions, or if there's a lot of things happening in the picture, you also have to realize what the frequencies that you have to work with. And it becomes a part of the composition. And so that was a very interesting film to do, because it was the first time we really had to pay attention to that. Because if you're in the same frequencies as some of the sound design, then it's gonna be complicated to play the music. But I also think just using sound as a tool to create is also very interesting. I mean, I think some of the modern scores that are using sound design as a compositional tool is really interesting, and I think it's a nice breath from melodic scores, and it gives, I think that it can create a lot of tension. And it's interesting because sort of the horror genre has been playing with that for a long time, but dramas are starting to evolve, and I think that even early David Lynch, I mean, he had, these sounds that were so particular and created anxiety, and he always I thought used sound in a very interesting way. But it's something that when you get a chance to do a film that's more modern, or you can use electronics, it's really interesting to get into that, and I really enjoy it. I love the way that sounds affect you, and I think that.
So this is Old Guard, which is actually it's a Netflix production that the premiered this year, 2020, and you did it with Volker Bertelmann. Also, I think if we could jump just to that piece of music, Marian, it's number 7, and it's called Rejuvenation. Yes, please. So this is really something new in the world of Dustin O'Halloran, a real action movie.
Yeah.
But at the same time, your music is not, it's still your voice, and it gives the film quite a depth. Could you talk about the voice you were sort of looking for with your music?
Well, the story, it's based on a graphic novel about these 5 people who cannot die, and they don't understand why, and they're trying to understand how to use it, but they don't have any other power except that. And it's a bit about what it means to live forever, to not die, what it means to lose people you love and continue on. And there's a lot of it. there's a lot of thoughts about what time means and what is a life lived. And so I thought, this, for me, the story was very interesting. There's a lot of action in the film, which I'd never done before. And I thought it was an interesting challenge. And I thought because the story had a lot of other sides to it and a lot of depth, that it was an interesting entry into a kind of more action. And Charlize Theron is such a strong actor, and she's such a great lead in this film.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, there was a lot to work with. It was fun. It was a big journey, and I think if you get into film scoring, you also don't want to keep doing the same thing. I think that's sort of, with your own work, there's such a different, I think this is where things split, is your creative work, and the deeper you get into film work, it becomes it's two roads, I think, and it's two ways of working. It's two creative paths. And if you want to keep scoring films, I think you need to kind of explore a wider range of things. Otherwise, you kind of find yourself repeating a lot of the same ideas, which isn't really interesting for me. But in your own work, it's a slower journey, and it's different because you're working on your own.
I mean, I guess you need to you also need to learn to put your ego as your ego, and not your voice, but maybe your sort of like 100% control as a solo composer next to writing for a film, which is, I mean, to put it roughly, it's a hired work, so, but you have to go into it creatively and still deliver your voice, because that's what they're asking from you, I guess.
And I think a lot of artists who make the jump from making records to film scoring, it can be a bit dramatic, because once you start writing for film, it's the first time you're getting really brutal feedback. And when things don't work, a lot of artists can be crushed really quickly, and you have to kind of learn how to get through that process. And with your own work, it's just yourself. But once you have all of it's like getting an album critiqued before you've even made it.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have to sort of learn to push through that, and to just understand that it's a process, and the give and the take that you'll have with the director and sometimes the producers. There can be a lot of decision making, and music is one of the last parts in the filmmaking. And so everybody is sort of an expert, even if they don't know about music.
And you have to serve a purpose.
Yeah, and you have to navigate that. And what I realized is that whatever makes the film better is what is right. And I think that at the end of the day, you're making a film, you're not making a record. So when you're making your own music, it's just the music, and that's what you focus on. But at the end of the day, the film is a lot of pieces, and the film has to be good. And whatever is making the film better is what's right for the film. So that's, maybe that's not always how you would approach music for yourself. So I think that's a big learning curve for a lot of people.
So we have a question related to that from Irena Kovarova. Do you consider yourself primarily as a film music composer and also a performing musician of your own music? What is the weight, or what's the scale?
I mean, I've always continued to make music for myself, and I think that that's what's most important to me at the end of the day. And the last years, I put a lot of time into my project, A Winged Victory for the Sullen, which is my collaboration with Adam Wiltsey.
Yeah.
And to make room for the scoring work, I've put some of my solo work aside, but I'm coming back to it, and I'm just now finishing a new record of my own. And I think the challenge is it's a lot of things, a lot of plates to have in the air at the same time, and not everybody has that. And the time that you have to do everything is is what it is. So I try to always make sure that I'm keeping my creative work going. I enjoy the film work, but I think at the end of the day, I'm more interested in my own work, just being a film composer. I think composing for film gets you out of your head, and it gets you away, and there's a bit of energy there. There's a timeline, there's deadlines. You have to create music and finish it. And I've learned a lot through that process, and I've learned a lot how to work with the orchestra, and I've gotten a chance to work with some great, incredible players that maybe I wouldn't have had if I just on my own. So they're
So the inspiration has been both ways, both from your solo career into the film world, obviously, as we've talked a lot about, but also the other way, that you managed to sort of develop some craft, your craft in the film music.
Well, it just means saying no to things and making sure you give time and protecting what you need to protect. And I don't think that as an artist, I would feel completely fulfilled just doing film work. So, but I like it, and I think that I'm just trying to be as selective as I can.
Let's talk a bit about your collaboration with Adam Wiltsey. I mean, you have a band together called A Winged Victory for the Sullen, which is a tongue twister. And why this title? Can you the band title, just why?
Well, that's honestly, I can't remember now. I mean, we actually met, Adam and I met when I was living in Italy, and he was playing with a band called Sparkle Horse, and they were playing a show in Bologna, and we were introduced. And he was sort of my first expat friend that I made when I was living in Europe. And his band, Stars of the Lid, we shared music. And at the time I was making Lumiere, and I asked him to play on a piece of music. And then that sort of just evolved into us just trying to make some music. We didn't really think it would last this long, or we would make this many records. So that whole project has just been a kind of serendipitous journey of just, being friends. And he lives in Brussels, so Berlin and Brussels, at the time when we could fly, was only an hour away by plane, so it was pretty close relatively. And yeah, it's been actually a really great project. I mean, I've really loved the music that we make, and Adam has a really interesting way of composing, and we just found that we complemented each other in a lot of ways. And actually today we just released a new track for a record we're putting out. All right. So,
I saw there was some countdown done yesterday, but I haven't had the chance to listen to it yet. We have a song from a film you did in 2016. You've been releasing albums together since 11, if I'm right, and a bunch of albums, and also some of it was used in a film called Francis Lee's first film. God's Own Country, Francis Lee, who later did Ammonite this year. This film is called Shadow of the Iris.
Yeah, the French title was just Iris, and then Iris. I think that's the non-French title.
And let's listen to the song, and it's called Gallery. It's clip number 6. All right, so this was the track Gallery from the film Iris, and the music is by A Winged Victory for the Sullen. You actually you did a tour this year before the world shut down, and you started in Prague at the Spectacolare Festival.
Yeah.
I know you didn't manage to finish your tour in the US.
The European part, we were supposed to do a whole US leg of the tour. It was kind of a miracle that we actually finished the Northern European part. We were going to come back and do some more shows in Europe later, but obviously all that got canceled. But yeah, it was a pretty epic tour. We brought our own sound system and our own lights, and the Wing Victory shows are always an experience, and it's quite a big group as well.
And it seems you keep you've managed to keep doing this throughout your film scoring career as well. I mean, Adam Wilsey is also doing his solo projects and solo scoring, but you managed to sort of like find each other again and find the time to be creative together is impressive.
Yeah, it's a bit of a challenge. I think when I was in Berlin, it was a little bit easier for us to make time and get together. But there's both of us working, which helps. Sometimes he'll be able to pick up things if I'm busy with other projects, and vice versa. But it's a collaboration that's meant a lot to me, and so it's been great. I mean, I'm really happy with all the records that we make, and it's, for some reason, it's the few records that I can listen back to, maybe because it's collaborative and it's both of us making music. So
Adam comes from more of a guitar and sort of ambient background with Stars of the Lit, and how do you feel he complements you, and what do you look for in a collaborator? Do you with Adam, for example, did you look? Does it feel like it's something different that he's bringing to the table? He's not the pianist like Folker's work.
Yeah, I think that's different. I mean, we both kind of get into string arranging. There's a bit of piano. Adam has a really interesting way of feeling time, and he sort of tends to stretch things out, and his concept of time is very unique. And I think that's what's really special about the collaboration, is we really slow things down, and we don't use that many elements in the music. It's very minimal in some ways, and he plays guitar, but the way he plays it doesn't sound like a guitar at all, and it almost sounds like the swelling of strings. And so there's a lot of compliments to just, we have a lot of space. We give each other a lot of space, and the way that we write the music is it's such a strange way of making music. It's not really anything like any of my other projects, because where we start and where we end is so, the journey, it goes through so many processes, and we get into sound processing and how that changes the direction of the music. And I don't know, it's one of those things that I can't really put my finger on it. It's just what him and I do together. And I think that those kind of collaborations are really special. You don't always find somebody that you can make music with and continue to make music with. And I think we're always surprised. When we made the first record, we had no plans to make another record. We just have never really had any, there was never a big trajectory of what we wanted to do. We've just been following, just if we continue making music, it just keeps going. So so it's just continued.
Mm-hmm. And I'm sure it's because there is an inspiration both ways.
Well, I think, any musical collaboration, I think, has to start with a friendship. But I think that just enjoying spending time with somebody and the conversations that you have, and I think just both of us living in Europe, being expats, I don't know, there was something that we always connected with. Mm-hmm. And it's just And I think that's where usually it starts. You need to be friends with the people you make music with.
We are actually more than 90 minutes into the talk, but we do have a bit more time, luckily, because we want to talk a bit about your latest film score for the movie Antoinette by the director Francis Lee. It premiered in Cannes in the premiered, as you might say. It has the Cannes Selected label, and it's been playing in a few festivals, among others, BFI London.
Yeah.
And I hope it'll reach a big screen in the future. But it's also going to be on Hulu, as far as I know. This is a collaboration with Volker Bertelmann again.
Yeah.
And do you want to introduce it, or shall we see? We have a few trailers for the film we can show.
Yeah,
to sort of set the feeling. So let's look at those two trailers back to back, please. So this film is it's actually your second collaboration with Francis Lee, but it's the first time he works with composers. Can you explain that?
Well, he was using pre-existing music in his last film, God's Own Country, and this is the first time he'd actually worked with composers writing specifically for the film. Francis Lee is he's a bit of a director that's out of time, which I love about him. He's just following his own compass, and I think he's not worried about, I mean, the film is a very patient film. There's a lot of space in the film, and there's a lot of moments with no dialogue, and he uses a lot of sound design, the sounds of the nature, which is a big part of this film. And
the waves, the loud waves.
Yeah, the waves
crashing in,
the feet in the sand, and it's very elemental. And I like that. You know, I think a lot of modern films are worried about the patience of an audience, and I think that that's something that's been forgotten. And if you go back and you watch a Tarkovsky film, they're incredibly long and slow, and I find these films so beautiful because you get to sort of sink into them, and I've missed that in modern filmmaking a lot, this idea that you have to push a plot and you have to create constant movement and music. And there's not much music in the film. It's only about 25 minutes of music. And it's, for me, it's just perfect. I think that it's rare that you get a director that will be courageous enough to let things play dry and just let great acting be what it is, and not try to overplay the drama. And so I love how understated the film is, and I think it makes it more powerful, especially in this time when everybody's just been sort of binging on so much television and films, and there's a lot of space in it. I think that people will really appreciate that.
It's actually 25 minutes into the film before the music comes on. Yeah. And I think on top of that, it's a film where you feel that most things are said between the lines and with looks. So yeah. So what kind of voice did you want to give to this film? What kind of addition could you bring into this extremely sort of simplistic, minimalistic expression?
Well, I think it was pretty clear that it wasn't going to be a big orchestra or a big ensemble, and it had to be very intimate and capture this feeling that he's created in his film, this really intimate personal story. And there isn't even that many locations as well. It's the film takes place in this small village in the late 1800s, and I think we had to sort of play. We didn't want to do a modern score that would pull it so much out of its time, but we also didn't want to give it a period score either. It was just sort of it's basically just really about the emotion and working with a small ensemble of instruments. Piano naturally worked well because of the nature of the intimacy, I think, of the instrument, and we recorded a lot of strings, very close mic'd, and actually did a bit of recording on an old piano from late 1800s that maybe gave a sense of the time period, but yeah,
some texture and some patina.
Yeah, but it's very much just a minimal ensemble of players, and it's a very delicate film. It was I think that was the challenge, is how to make it work with not overstepping it, not putting too much music into it, making it meaningful. And when you only have that much music to work with, it has to count. And I think that's one of the things that I really like.
Did you know already? It's actually a question from Daniel McGill again. Do you know already in the beginning of writing that it's for solo piano, for example, or do you decide later on to add instruments?
There's a bit of quartet. There's piano. There's a little bit of we use a little bit of a larger ensemble strings just in some parts, just to give it a bit of depth in some of the scenes. I mean, there's some of the landscape and the depth of the picture. We wanted to try to capture that, but it's very restrained. And Francis was very clear where the music should be. There was never a question of where he wanted music, and he was very thoughtful about how he wanted to use music. He gave us a lot of freedom on the music that we wrote, but it was very clear where it needed to be. And so we had this very clear idea of, okay, this is going to be not much music. And the first idea, actually, that I mean, Francis he's an ultimate minimalist. He wanted to create a single piece of music that would just evolve through the whole film and come together in the end,
like a theme or a piece, like melodic piece. Yeah.
And in some ways we worked with that a little bit. We diverged in a few points, but it's a bit of the end is sort of the entire piece of music that plays out, and there's fragments of it earlier in the film, but then we found that that idea didn't work for every scene, because there were just moments where it just needed to be different. The feeling was different, but a lot of it is based on this kind of main theme of the film.
I think it reminds me of the sound of a score you did solo, or maybe an approach that is like the one you used for the film Puzzle from 2018 by Mark Turteltaub.
Yeah.
I just watched it the other day. It's a remake, actually, of an Argentinian film from 2010 called Puzzle, which was in Berlinale.
Oh, okay.
And this one is an American indie, and the way you use music in that one is that it's quite a drama, but you don't score the dramatic scenes ever. You score in between, and it's more like the thoughtful moments and the sort of imagination of this. It's a housewife who discovers that she has a thing for puzzles, jigsaw puzzles, and the imagination and the inspiration she finds in that. That's where I hear your voice as a composer. But on a you would think that a producer would ask for a dramatic scoring in general.
Yeah.
Do you sometimes have to deal with that sort of approach or request directly?
I mean, I think there's always a push and a pull that happens with a film, and sometimes they want you to push something, but at the end of the day, I always feel like picture wants something, and it's either going to work or it's not. And if you push it too much, it's usually pretty clear pretty quickly when it's not working, and it feels over dramatic. And I think a lot of times producers and directors need to see it. They need to you need to go through a process, and they need to see why it doesn't work, because they need to, they're looking at their film, and they've watched their film so many times. So that's usually a process. And then you have to pull it back. And usually that's what happens. And I think I'm naturally somebody that always pulls it back naturally. My tendency is never to go there, to go
stripping down. And
so I think that I'm, maybe for me, sometimes, they will want to push it a little bit more dramatic, but I always tend to want to pull back that, because I feel that if the acting is good and it's strong, then you're supporting the acting rather than leading it. And that's, I think that's the thing that I've learned with the process of film is a great story and great acting should stand on its own with no music, and you should just support it when the moment is right, or in between the moments. I think that's filmmaking, when filmmaking is coming together.
Sure. I have a few questions for you that from the audience that we should get to, and they're very concrete, and I hope we can get some quick answers from you. Favorite mic pair for piano?
What?
Your favorite mic pair for recording piano?
Okay. Well, it depends. I just finished a solo record, and I did a lot of recording in some spaces in Reykjavik. I just recorded at a church in the center of Reykjavik, and I was using 2 U67s, 2 pairs of Coles, 2 C12s, if that means anything to anybody.
And then Chris Fisher writes, and preamp? ?
Well, I've been using these old Studer preamps, which are from the 60s. And I tend to love, most of my studio and preamps are usually around that era. It's sort of my favorite period of recording equipment.
Sure. And same Chris, he's asking about, now it gets personal. What's your primary source of income? Is it from record sales, film scoring, licensing, streaming royalties?
I mean, as an artist and a film composer, I think it's a bit of everything. I think that the thing that probably most people don't realize is how much of a budget you can spend recording a film. And a lot of the early films, I didn't actually make anything because I spent it recording. And I think that it's always a bit of everything. I think that's the challenge.
There's a question about series scoring. In terms of composing music for film versus series, is there a different creative process you adapt in terms of thinking of the outlet format? Katarina asks.
Yeah, well, scoring for a film is very different than scoring for a series, because it's the difference between 2 hours and 10 hours of picture. So there's going to be a lot more moments where the music takes a backseat in a series, I think, where there's a lot of story that has to be told, and maybe you're working with certain themes that come back and evolve in a much longer arc. And films usually have a much faster arc because they're putting a lot of story into a shorter amount of time. So I think film work can be music. It gets pretty deep because working with just an hour and a half or 2 hours, everything is very important, and every piece of music is very important. And not to say that people, television is changed so much and it's becoming the same. But I think it's more of just the arc of time that you're dealing with. So the music is going to evolve usually faster in a film. But I don't know, hopefully that answers it.
And something a bit different. I wanted to talk in depth about the meaning of the environment that you're in, and both when it comes to sort of geography and I mean you're from the U.S. and from the West Coast, and moved to Europe early on and lived in Italy, in Berlin, and you're in Reykjavik now. We actually have a question related to it. Do you find that living in Europe helps you to organically meet directors for independent films rather than in LA?
I think Europe has just been a better place to make music for me, just because I think that Los Angeles is a city that's very driven by the industry, and it's mainly Hollywood. And I think in Europe there's a lot of other things going on besides. I mean, the film world of Europe is a much more different landscape, because you have all of the different countries, and a lot of different countries have their own aesthetics as well, and their own tastes. And so I think, I mean, it's hard to answer because I didn't come to Europe for any particular, it wasn't, necessarily music driven. So, but I find that the collaborations that I've had in Europe have been really wonderful, because there's in Reykjavik alone, there's just such an incredible pool of musicians, and a lot of musicians here are not working in film at all. They're just creating their own music. And I always find that those are my favorite people to work with, is people outside of the film world. And I feel that you get a lot of amazing results working with people who've been defining a way to play the cello, and they've had a lot of time to tour and create their own voice, and then you do a collaboration or you do a session with them. And I find in Europe there's just an amazing variety of musicians. I mean, Berlin is the same.
And this environment that you're in now, has it inspired your new record?
Well, I think
your upcoming solo record, right? Which will come out on Deutsche Grammophon in not so long.
I mean, I was actually planning to record in Berlin, and so I didn't plan to record the record here. And I think that everybody in this time in the world, I think, is working with what they have around them. And the one thing that I discovered being here in Reykjavik is that there's these incredible acoustic spaces. There's a lot of churches and places where you can set up and do mobile recording. And so the new record I recorded in 2 different churches here in Reykjavik, and I also did a bit of recording in a theater in the north of Iceland in Akureyri. And that was not planned. So that's just I wanted to make my record, and so that's what was here. And it ended up being a really I think that I'm really happy with that it ended up that way, because there's not a lot of people here. So there's a lot of silence, and you have a chance to and the churches here are the people who run them are incredibly relaxed and super cool. So you can really, organizing things like this isn't complicated. And I think in other countries where the churches still have this strong presence, they're much more used to people recording. And so yeah, it's actually been it's been great to do the record here.
Do you feel that you have all these jobs and hats going on? I mean, you do your own work, and you score films, you tour whenever that's possible again, obviously. Do you feel you found your balance?
Probably not. I think I think that I'm because I've never really planned, especially with Winged Victory. I didn't know that the project would continue for so long, and I never really understood how all of these things would grow. So it's definitely hard to balance everything out, because I also enjoy taking time for myself and doing other things and stepping away from music. I love making music, but you also need time away, I think, to refill yourself and spend time with with your friends, and yeah, it's a challenge. I think that I'm enjoying really the break and everything that happened. It's been really nice to get back to writing music again, and I took a bit of a break from making films, and probably will come back to it next year. But most of my pandemic time has just been working on my own music.
Sure.
Yeah.
You got something out of that.
I feel very lucky that that I could be in a place by myself and still continue to work, because a lot of people haven't been so lucky. So it's a strange time, but
and I think we got lucky as well. We have to cut it here, but I want to thank you for the opportunity to get this insight into your work and in your studio, in your mind, how you approach your projects, and I can't wait to hear your solo release. So thank you so much, Dustin, and to our audiences out there. We hope to see you in the real world someday in the new year.
Thank you very much.
We can play the last song. Yeah, it's called An Ending, a Beginning.